Welcome to the Legal Services of New Jersey, Melville D. Miller Jr. Justice Series. We are very excited to have you all here to participate in today's session, Reproductive Rights and Health in New Jersey. My name is Rachel Elkin. I'm the Director of Training at Legal Services of New Jersey.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you all. Good to have you with us. I'm a Senior Vice President at Legal Services of New Jersey, and as an organization, we support and coordinate the statewide system of legal services that provides civil legal assistance to those who are low income throughout New Jersey in various areas of law, everything from fighting evictions to protecting domestic violence victims, helping people access critical government safety net programs. This includes advocacy and public education on critical issues, which is why we're here today. Years ago, LSNJ launched a public education webinar series named after our former president and co-founder, D. Miller, the D. Miller Justice Series, which is designed to bring greater awareness to important economic and social justice issues impacting all New Jerseyans. According to a number of sources, the federal administration has created a challenging, if not hostile, environment for those seeking to advance reproductive rights in the U.S. One of the most discussed actions was the 2022 Supreme Court decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which overturned the constitutional right to abortion previously established by Roe v. Wade. In light of this landscape, the discussion today is about what's happening in our state, New Jersey, what's happening in the courts, the legislature, what is the applicable state law, what's happening on the ground, and what are advocates doing. So for this Justice Series event, like others, we have gathered a roundtable of experts to address issues from various viewpoints and perspectives on reproductive rights, health, and reproductive justice. And we will address developments in the law impacting women's reproductive rights, including policy advocacy, health implications, and health disparities. Again, we have an outstanding panel with us joining today, and I want to take some due notice of their outstanding credentials and experience. And I will introduce them now one by one before we get into our discussion. First, Aarin Williams is a civil rights attorney, reproductive justice advocate, and senior strategist with a record of leading high-impact equity initiatives across law, policy, and public systems. She currently serves as chief advisor to the director of the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, where she has helped drive major enforcement actions, including historic redlining matters, the nation's first law prohibiting housing discrimination based on criminal record, statewide efforts to combat appraisal bias, and has served on statewide task forces related to reproductive rights, healthcare inequities, and more. Previously, Aarin served as senior staff attorney at National Advocates for Pregnant Women, now Pregnancy Justice, representing pregnant individuals nationwide facing criminalization and advising on groundbreaking litigation and advocacy campaigns. Her work on pregnancy-related prosecutions and bodily autonomy was featured on CNN's United Shades of America, earning national recognition. Separately, Aarin trains leaders and organizations to align mission, equity, and strategy to create cultures where justice is actively practiced, not just promised. Jasmine Winters is the coordinator of the Thrive NJ Coalition, where she passionately advocates for women's reproductive rights and promotes sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice through policy change and advocacy. Since 2018, Jasmine has served as a dedicated and empathetic patient advocate for the Cherry Hill Women's Center, an independent abortion provider in South Jersey. Her work in reproductive rights extends to her role as a coalition member of the Connecting Our Communities for NJ, a BIPOC-led coalition where she serves as a community organizational leader, striving to create greater visibility for Black, Indigenous, and people of color families across New Jersey. Additionally, Jasmine recently launched Peaceful Minds Haven, a nonprofit organization focused on helping individuals find the connections and resources they need for mental and emotional wellness. The organization's goal is to provide a safe and supportive space for individuals to explore their inner selves and find peace, ultimately guiding them toward a healthier, happier lifestyle. Jeanne LoCicero is the legal director of the ACLU of New Jersey. She supervises the litigation program and related advocacy of the ACLU New Jersey's legal department and manages its 16-person team. Jeanne joined the ACLU-NJ as a staff attorney in 2004 and served as its deputy legal director for 10 years prior to becoming legal director in 2018. She has litigated and advocated in a wide range of civil rights and civil liberties cases, with a focus on prison conditions, racial equity, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and reproductive health rights and access. She has been honored by her Law School Alumni Association for her public service and by the Garden State Equality for her advocacy on behalf of transgender and non-binary people. Roslyn Rogers Collins is president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan New Jersey. In this role, she has oversight of 5 health centers in Essex and Passaic counties, including downtown Newark, East Orange, Paterson, Ironbound Newark, and Montclair. These centers provide reproductive health care services to more than 21,000 men, women, and adolescents annually. PPMNJ's education program presents workshops to almost 9,000 individuals. Ms. Rogers Collins' commitment to reproductive health care began at the age of 16 during a high school summer internship at a Planned Parenthood affiliate, then located in Jersey City. She went on to earn a bachelor's degree in social work from Seton Hall University and a master's degree in health administration from New Jersey City University. A lifelong New Jersey resident, Roslyn taught human sexuality as an adjunct professor for more than 17 years at Essex County College, William Patterson, and Kane universities. She has many professional affiliations and serves on the various boards and committees, including Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Planned Parenthood Action Fund of New Jersey, the New Jersey Family Planning League, Affiliate Risk Management Services Incorporated, and Monumental Baptist Church of New Jersey. So, as I said, we have a terrific panel and can't wait to jump into the conversation with them. So, again, thank you all for being here and for talking with us today. So, to start off the conversation, maybe we can get a bit of framing on the question, and this question for all of you. When we're talking about reproductive rights and health, what do we mean? As a foundational concept, what is the scope? What does it entail? Abortion, contraception, pregnancy, childbirth, emergency medical services, and what does it mean for each of you?
And whoever. Here.
Okay, terrific.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. What it looks like for me, as far as reproductive rights, this means meeting people where they are, ensuring that accessing care is not just a legal right, but a lived reality. It also, for me, means centering dignity, respect, and compassion in every interaction. Speaking with my Women's Centers hat on, we see firsthand every day what reproductive rights looks like in practice. As an independent abortion provider and reproductive health care center located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, we serve patients across the state, as well as many who travel from out of state due to restrictions where they currently live. And so our work includes patient-centered abortion care, emotional support, trauma-informed practices, and just ensuring that every person has the information they need to make the decisions that are right for them. And so we see patients navigating real barriers such as travel logistics, job insecurity, financial challenges, childcare needs, fear of judgment and misinformation. And so because of that, our role extends far beyond our clinical care. And it's about creating a space of dignity, safety, humanity for people at one of the most sensitive and impactful moments of their lives. And so that is why reproductive rights truly, for me, is about caring for real people with real circumstances and ensuring that they have the autonomy and support that they deserve.
I'm happy to add to that, Akil. Thank you, Jasmine. Good afternoon. Um, I'm glad we're setting the frame, we're setting the conversation around the question of reproductive health, which is very broad. It includes contraception, fertility treatments, prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, miscarriage, pregnancy loss, abortion, emergency reproductive care, maternal mental health, and even long-term pregnancy-related conditions. And from a civil rights perspective, reproductive health is also about whether people can actually access that care safely and equitably. So, can someone take time off of work for fertility treatments? Can a pregnant worker sit instead of stand for 8 hours? Can someone access postpartum mental health care without losing their job? Can a person experiencing pregnancy loss get accommodations without being stigmatized or disbelieved? And these questions matter because, they directly affect maternal and infant health outcomes. We know that lack of work accommodations, stress, and delayed or denied care are associated with worse outcomes, particularly for Black people, particularly for Black women and other women of color, who in New Jersey and nationally experience significantly higher rates of maternal mortality, infant mortality, and morbidity. And so reproductive health does not exist in a vacuum. It is deeply impacted by housing stability, employment conditions, access to healthcare and education, and economic security, like Jasmine touched on, all classic social determinants of health that also fall squarely within civil rights law, which is, what I will contribute to the conversation today. And I'll just plug, that's why New Jersey's Reproductive Health Information Hub, which is run by the Department of Health, is also a really important resource that I know will be shared later. It provides information about available services, referrals to providers, and resources for patients and clinicians. And it's supposed to be a practical tool that connects people to care and complements legal protections and reflects a broader commitment to reproductive justice, which is different from reproductive rights. Reproductive justice is a framework that's established by Black women and femmes that's focused on the human right to bodily autonomy, and it's about, whether to have or not have children, and to be able to access all that care and even raise them if you choose to have children, in safe communities.
And I'll just pick up to amplify Aaron's last point, which is that I think, especially since a lot of us are lawyers on this webinar, that for many decades there was a real rights focus and not really like what it looked like on the ground, being able to access reproductive health care and the whole range of issues that Aaron identified. And so I just want to name that the reproductive justice framework that Black women started decades ago is really something I think that's informed a lot of the work. Like, they've done a lot of work to educate the legal community about this, and to really think about like, there's no such thing as rights without access. And so just wanted to name that part.
And I'll just chime in agreement with everything that's been said. But I think it's important for us also to realize that when we talk about reproductive health, we're not just talking about a specific aspect of time in a person's life cycle. We're talking about adolescence and development and the education to understand, for young people to understand what's happening right through for women, perimenopause and menopause and what happens. And there's still reproductive issues that occur even after a person is no longer able to physically reproduce. It's the information that needs to be obtained regarding contraceptive methods, regarding the fact that in this environment, there's a lot of misinformation, and people need to understand what rights that they still have. Abortion in New Jersey is still legal and still available, and that message needs to get out. It's the advocacy piece, making sure that our legislators are informed and understand what the issues are, so that they're able to support and ensure that the legislation that gets passed and approved locally, statewide, and nationally is information that will protect all of our rights.
Those are all great responses. And I think even in an attempt to try to frame it, it really looked like there's a lot to unpack there. Everything from just the way we frame it, the reproductive justice framework. And that's something we'll get back to a little bit later in the program. But maybe we can start with the foundation of law. And foundation of law, I'm looking towards Jeanne. And one question here, as we sort of begin the conversation around rights, the Constitution, the New Jersey Constitution is a fundamental source of law for folks' rights. And as you stand as one of the leaders in the standout advocacy organization in New Jersey and nationwide, can you talk about a little bit about the protections and the rights that we can find there around reproductive health, and maybe a bit of how that translates directly to the people in New Jersey?
Sure. So a lot of us know about Roe v. Wade and, of course, Dobbs, and as Akil mentioned earlier. And so, overnight, the Dobbs decision really upended the lives of millions of people across the country and the legal rights. But one thing that isn't always clear here in New Jersey is that our state constitution has for decades provided an independent source of rights that protect everyone in New Jersey. And that doesn't turn on the federal constitutional landscape. Those of us might remember that, the federal constitution creates the floor, not the ceiling. And so the Dobbs opinion subsequently did not impact the right to abortion here in New Jersey. And so New Jersey's constitution has provided stronger protection since the early 1980s, more than Roe ever did. So, for example, in New Jersey, the New Jersey Supreme Court found that it violated equal protection principles to prohibit Medicaid funding for abortion or to require parental notification for abortion. And so that's been, they found that the right to choose whether to have an abortion is a fundamental right of all pregnant women under the New Jersey Constitution. I'm quoting from Right to Choose v. Byrne, which was 1982. And then in 2000, in Planned Parenthood of Central New Jersey versus Farmer, the court found that a person's right to control her reproductive decisions is among the most fundamental of rights under the state constitution. And so that's the legal landscape we're operating on in New Jersey. And so that we have these terrific constitutional protections. But what we also know is during that same time period that there was many, many barriers to access. And so that has been, even when we had these constitutional rights, access to abortion care has been limited in New Jersey. And some of that was because of onerous regulations on abortion providers. There's geographic barriers. And so the New Jersey Family Planning League and Rutgers School of Public Health found that, there's several counties that have no abortion providers. 6 counties only have medication abortion providers. There are no clinics. So the counties that have no clinics are Cape May, Hudson, or at least I think Hudson might be on the move, and I'll turn to my other folks, but Gloucester, Cumberland, and Salem. And so just to say that we had these terrific constitutional rights, but still barriers in place. And so there's been a lot of advocacy in recent years to protect the right in the wake of Dobbs, and then also really give meaning to access through legislative and regulatory advocacy.
Terrific. Just moving a bit from the constitutional framework, there was also some efforts to strengthen laws in New Jersey. And one in leading up to this panel, one of the ones that came up was the Freedom of Reproductive Choice Act. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So as Dobbs was making its way through the courts, New Jersey advocates came together and created the Thrive Coalition, which now Jasmine is a co-leader of, and worked on a comprehensive piece of legislation to pass. And in 2022, we got the Freedom of Reproductive Choice Act. And so that broadly protects the right to reproductive health care without constraints or conditions. And so it really does cover the spectrum, where it says that every individual present in the state shall have the fundamental right to choose or refuse contraception or sterilization, and choose whether to carry a pregnancy, to give birth, or to terminate a pregnancy. And so, what's really helpful is that for decades we had this constitutional law, but now we can look in the statute books and say it's right here. And I actually, if you're interested, I'd really commend you to take a look at the Freedom of Reproductive Choice Act, because the opening language, the findings by the legislature, really sets forth New Jersey's strong public policy in favor of access to reproductive health care. It's got some terrific language in there that I think, as advocates and lawyers, will be useful in pushing back against potential restraints on access to reproductive health care. So just to say, that was one piece that kind of made the rights clear, and now there's a lot of work being done to make the access piece more meaningful. But just to say, there's some other legal advances, is that several state agencies have updated their regulations to make it easier for providers. And then there have been investments, like budgetary commitments to reproductive health care. And I'm sure Jasmine and Roslyn can talk a little bit about that. And but we really need the legislature to step up and being proactive to protecting patients, making access more meaningful, and of course, protecting providers because of the numerous threats going on around the country.
Great. And that access piece, is that something that there was a recent bill package that was introduced, but I think it didn't make it to final passage. This was the set that was advanced by Senator Ruiz, the Reproductive Freedom and Health Equity. Was that in part of the goal there, to try and make outcomes and access real for folks?
Exactly, yes. So there's 9 bills in Senator Ruiz's package, and they cover a lot of different issues. And actually 2 of them are, I know, priorities for this legislative lame duck period, but I'll go over them briefly. And I know we have some links for later on that have access to, I think, Planned Parenthood's materials on this. But we have, so the first one would remove medically unnecessary restrictions on reproductive health providers. Another provides insurance coverage for abortions without cost sharing. So right now, even patients who have insurance, and I know there are folks who can talk more to this, there's still huge financial barriers and copays and other costs that patients have to share in a very short time frame. So that bill would eliminate the cost sharing piece. A bill that would provide patients and providers with protections, legal protections, when it comes to when they provide reproductive health care and then gender affirming care. There are investments in reproductive health care infrastructure. Another bill ensures patients' reproductive health data is protected. It makes sure that there's more accessibility on college campuses. Provides student loan redemption for reproductive health care providers. Allows New Jerseyans to support reproductive health care with donations through their tax returns, and then improves the process for the Medicaid billing for coverage for emergency contraceptive. So I will, hopefully we'll get you more information on that as the webinar proceeds. But just to say that if these are issues you care about, I really encourage you to contact your state and state assembly and senators to let them know that you want them to move the reproductive freedom and health equity bill package. So thanks.
So picking up on our conversation, this is great. A lot of information about the law, what's on paper, but a focus on access and impact. And from that, maybe pivoting to looking at you, Aarin. Something that we know sometimes happens is that people can face discrimination with respect to their rights or their status. Can you talk a little bit about those protections and what DCR is doing in their role, and a little bit of how folks can attempt to enforce their rights or to make sure that they are using the tools that are available to help
Sure.
their outcomes. Thanks.
Sure. Absolutely. So I'll start with a little description of what DCR is before I talk about the discrimination, and then I'll talk about how to maybe file a complaint if you experience or believe you are experiencing or someone else might be experiencing discrimination. So briefly, the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, also known as DCR, is our state's civil rights agency that enforces various laws, but specifically for this conversation, the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, which is arguably one of the oldest and arguably one of the most expansive state anti-discrimination laws in the nation. And what that allows for us to do is to serve as a neutral investigator. And so what that means is that on one end, that folks who come into New Jersey or who are New Jersey citizens and believe that they're experiencing discrimination in housing, employment, or places open to the public, and places open to the public include practically any place, quite honestly, especially when we're talking about healthcare and services. If you believe you're experiencing discrimination or retaliation or harassment, you can come to the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights and file a complaint, where investigators and some attorneys will work to investigate those claims. And then also we do other things that are a bit more proactive. We provide varying levels of trainings for the public that are free around discrimination for people who believe they're experiencing it, but also for those who are obligated to follow the law. So housing providers, employers, business owners, those types of things. And we also have a mediation unit and a community response unit that goes into the community response to civil rights violations, and a policy unit that focuses on legislation and policy documents, and an affirmative enforcement unit that has jurisdiction under the director to proactively investigate claims, even if a specific claim was not filed with DCR. If we believe that there are discrimination, so for example, we know that there is systemic home appraisal discrimination that occurs around our country and our state, we can actually proactively investigate. So with that in mind, with respect to this conversation, discrimination related to reproductive health shows up more often than people probably even realize. It is often, I'm sure we understand, disproportionately impacting Black communities and Black people. And when we're talking about reproductive health, the full continuum of it, unfortunately, deeply impacts Black women and children, women of color, low-income workers, immigrants, and people with disabilities. So it can look like a denial of accommodations, retaliation for taking leave, differential treatment by healthcare providers, or penalties in housing or education settings. And so DCR enforces, like I mentioned, the law against discrimination, and that includes protections tied to abortion, fertility treatments, pregnancy loss, breastfeeding and lactation, postpartum recovery, perimenopause, and menopause. Again, the whole continuum of what it means to be or try to become pregnant, and then experience birthing and all the conditions that can flow from that. So our role is twofold. First, we engage often in education and prevention, issuing guidance documents, fact sheets, know your rights and know your rights trainings and materials, which is also often based on our website. Second, when discrimination occurs, individuals can file complaints for free at bias.njcivilrights.gov. And again, DCR can investigate and enforce the law. And so reproductive rights are civil rights, and when they are violated, there's real consequences. And I hope that the takeaway in this conversation is that in New Jersey, reproductive rights are protected by law, they're backed by enforcement, and they're supported by a network of state resources. And if those rights are violated, hopefully that when folks feel like if they can come to DCR and we can help them to work against it, or again, if those are obligated to follow the law, which is pretty much everyone, you have a resource to understand what the law is and what your obligations are. I can go into other things around accommodations and things too. I know I touched on a lot. Akil.
No, that's great. And I think there are a lot of resources that we are going to be collecting and being able to provide to the audience, which I'm very excited about. If we were to drop it in the link right now, it might explode the link. But we will make those resources available. I did want to ask, as we're touching base, there was something that was raised earlier about this concept of reproductive justice and the impact in terms of it encompassing this concept of not just who has the right or to not have the right to choose or to not choose to have a child, but also that children can be brought into healthy and non-harmful communities and settings. Can you talk a little bit about that? And anyone who wants to pick up that thread, please feel free.
I can, but I would love to hear from Roslyn or Jasmine too.
Roslyn or Jasmine? Okay.
You can take us away, Aarin.
Okay, it looked like Roslyn was leaning in. Yeah, so both Jasmine and Roslyn, I think Jasmine especially really works even closer on the ground with folks who are experiencing the things that we were discussing here, the ways that reproductive rights, but more specifically reproductive justice, really impacts people's lives. And what even Roslyn started to explain is that when we think, unfortunately, about reproductive justice and like conceiving, we think about that, starting at a particular point when you might be deciding you may or may not want to get pregnant. But to Rosalind's point earlier, that really is the continuum of our entire life. Whether we desire to become pregnant or have the capacity to do so, everything is really impacting that. And that's obviously deeply intertwined with health in general and the social determinants of health. I learned in some ways at the feet of the women and people at Sister Song, which is the premier reproductive justice organization in our country, largely based in the South, but all of these issues impact everyone. And just explaining that reproductive justice is deeper and more personal in some ways than reproductive rights, where rights is, as Jeanne mentioned, about the legal framework. And how do we exercise those legal frameworks? How do we fight against that? Really important. But first, you have to start with the justice part. And what does that look like to define justice when it comes to reproductive health and experience people as the fullness of the people? And so as you were mentioning, Akil, about what it means to have a safe and healthy community where people can hope to have if they want to have and raise their families in a place. So we're talking about nowadays data centers or environmental racism is in different places and how that is impacting people's health. We're not only just talking about the abortion access, but truly abortion access too. But even before we get there, what does it mean to have safe and comprehensive and accurate? We cannot even underemphasize what it means to have accurate information when it comes to sexual health and making sure that people understand what it means to even sometimes get pregnant. What does it look like for people to have access to fertility treatments that are really expensive? So, reproductive justice is about ensuring that justice is intertwined in and applying to all spectrums of a person's life, that we don't meet people only when they are desiring to become or to terminate a pregnancy, but really we're meeting them at all the different points in their lives, because all of these points and trigger points in life decisions are happening from the time that we get here. So hopefully that was sufficient.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jasmine.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Aarin, and I can add to that, especially with the last piece that you mentioned, just reproductive rights. In addition to what I stated earlier, just it means making sure people have the legal right to care and the real ability to get that care. And so at the Women's Center, so much of our work goes beyond the procedure itself. And just, again, speaking to what Aarin was saying, we help patients navigate those practical barriers that can make or break access. Things like transportation, support, funding assistance for procedures, lodging for patients, traveling long distances, and connecting those patients, those people with abortion funds and community partners who can also help. And so these supports are extremely critical because many of the people we see on a day-to-day basis are already balancing jobs, childcare. A lot of our patients already have children and families that they're raising, financial limitations and long travel distances. And so without these resources and access to these resources, that access does become privilege instead of a right. And so we also work intentionally to break the stigma around abortion by creating compassionate, judgment-free environment where patients feel seen, heard, supported, and we strive to provide clear, accurate information um, around trauma-informed care and emotional support so patients know that they're not alone and that their decision is respected. And so on the ground, reproductive rights, it looks like this kind of wraparound support, addressing the real world obstacles that patients face and ensuring that they can receive care safely with dignity and humanity.
That's
And
all right.
as Jasmine and Aarin stated, at Planned Parenthood, we find that many of those who use our health services, we're their only healthcare provider. Although our primary services are around reproductive health, contraception, a few years ago, we instituted a patient navigation program because as patients come in and they're coming in for a specific issue, during the course of their visit, we're able to uncover that they have other needs that need to be linked to the communities. So through our patient navigation program, we've been able to help patients access whether they need to get health insurance for themselves or family members for other healthcare needs. We're able to, as Jasmine said, we can provide transportation to and from a health visit. We see patients coming in for abortion care from other states. Our navigators can work with those navigators from around the country to get those patients in and get the services that they need and then get them back home safely. So we are very, very cognizant of the fact that, as Jasmine explained, our patients are coming to us as whole individuals with a variety of healthcare needs and social needs. And while we do have our limitations, the organization tries its best to address those needs and direct the patients in a way that they're able to access the additional services that benefit them.
Yes. Just staying with you for a moment, Roslyn, can you talk a little bit about maybe the community need for an organization such as yours, Planned Parenthood? Maybe talk a little bit about the history, and you've already started talking about some of the things you're doing, the patient navigation program, and some of these other things. But can you put a little more information for that people can latch onto?
Yes, thank you. Well, Planned Parenthood, Metropolitan New Jersey is one of two affiliates in the state. And as you described earlier in my bio, we serve Essex, Hudson, and Passaic counties. The other affiliate is serving the rest of the state. We are an organization, nonprofit, that's celebrating our 98th anniversary next year. So we've been on the ground providing reproductive health care and ensuring access for many years. Our services include contraception services. We do HIV testing and counseling. We provide STI testing, screening, and treatment. We do tele MAB services now. And Jeanne, when you were talking about Hudson County, while we don't have a physical brick and mortar center in Hudson County, in September we rolled out tele MAB services so that persons who are pregnant and they meet certain criteria as it relates to the gestation period and some of the other medical areas, they're able to access abortion services from the comfort of their homes without even coming into the health center. We
I'm
have
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. The MAB services. Could you explain what that is for?
that's medication abortion care. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Planned Parenthood has a series of alphabets and we use all kinds of shortcuts. So it's medical abortion services,
Okay. Thank you.
and so they can come into any one of our 5 health centers for medication abortion, or they can access through MAB services. We have a virtual health center in addition to the 5 brick and mortar centers, and patients can access through the virtual health center any of the services that we are offering within the brick and mortar structure. We just opened one of our health centers in Newark, our largest health center. We're now open 7 days a week. So folks can come in 7 days a week. We're open late nights, Monday through Friday, and on Saturdays and Sundays, we're open from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And once again, that's to create opportunities for access for those who might be working and might have other limitations that they're not able to take care of during regular business hours during the week. In addition to the healthcare program, we also do education. We're out in the community. We have an education team of 4, and they serve in community health centers, public schools, any place where folks feel like there's a need to get education around sexuality, reproductive health care, dating violence. They have a menu of services, and you'll find them on our website. The educators can go into community programs. They can go into homes. We've started a program around communication for parents and their children. We did an overnight retreat, and we had the parents and children come in. And the purpose of that was to have them to start to talk to each other and learn how to communicate around matters related to sexuality and reproductive health care. So we're running the gamut of services and programs throughout. And our services are available, or we take I'll talk a little bit about the Medicaid issue. We take third-party insurance. We have a sliding fee scale, so people are not turned away based on their inability to pay. They're able to come in and obtain the services that they need. Back in July, there was a defund Medicaid, and unfortunately, we have not been reimbursed for any Medicaid claims since July. We are about $1 million down in terms of unclaimed revenue from Medicaid, but we are not turning Medicaid patients away. If a patient comes in, they're a Medicaid recipient, we're still able to provide them with the service that they need. We have a really good relationship with the state. Governor Murphy has been very supportive of Planned Parenthood, and not only Planned Parenthood, but the men and women in the state of New Jersey around accessing health care. We're in conversations now with the governor's office and the Department of Health to get some Medicaid support. They're working out the details, but from what we understand, they're going to be able to give us some sort of relief so that we can continue to provide the services that are needed in the communities.
That's great. You're talking about being able to provide folks with people who need services, that the care they need, putting that first, and that it's in harmony with a sort of running theme here. And Jasmine was talking about this, specifically about meeting people where they are and doing that. And Jasmine, I want to give you a little more time to talk a bit about your organization, your organizations, your many coalitions, and your work in this space, and anything you want to advance. I know we talked a little bit offline about the disparities and some of the things that have been echoed here. So if you do want to provide some information here, we're all ears.
Yeah, I'd love to. In addition to the women's centers, as Jeanne had touched on, Jeanne and I are actually a part of Thrive New Jersey Coalition, which is a statewide coalition of more than 80 organizations where we work collectively to advance sexual and reproductive health rights and justice through coordinated advocacy and policy change. Our members represent a broad range of communities and expertise across the state of New Jersey, which include but are not limited to medical providers, legal and policy experts, faith-based partners, immigrant rights organizations, and so many other community-based organizations that are all deeply rooted in the populations that they serve. In addition to our collective work as a broader coalition, we hold space for 6 subcommittees. Those 6 subcommittees are abortion access, maternal justice, menstrual equity, interfaith partners, our sex education subcommittee, and last but not least, our operations subcommittee. And that subcommittee helps to coordinate, co-lead, and help us all to galvanize when needed. And so these subcommittees help to guide that coalition structure and strategy. One of the things that I love most about being a part of Thrive New Jersey is that our greatest strength is our diversity. Organizations such as the ACLU of New Jersey, Answer, Garden State Equality, March of Dimes, NCJW Essex and Bergen, and of course Planned Parenthood, and so many more. Of course, as I said, we're comprised of more than 80 organizations, but all of these organizations bring unique community lenses and areas of expertise and spheres of influence. And so the diversity of the coalition allows us to approach reproductive justice from multiple angles and to collectively advance priorities across the state of New Jersey with that deep understanding that we are greater in number.
Terrific. And just following up on the disparity thread, if there's anything that you wanted to bring to light or you think that people should know about that.
Disparities as far as access?
Disparities in access, yes, and care.
Disparities in access and care, I would say to shed light on disparities as far as barriers, stigma, misinformation, insurance coverage gaps, long travel distance and transportation challenges, harassment or fear around seeking care or speaking about the care, staff shortages, burnout across the field for abortion providers, financial barriers, and of course, policy restrictions. Even in states with legal protections, face some policy restrictions. We have 2 locations in the state of Pennsylvania, and although we have access in those states, there are still policy restrictions such as a 24-hour waiting period, minors needing to go through judicial bypass if they don't have the support from a parent or legal guardian to help them get the care and access that they need. So when I think of disparities, I think about the barriers to getting that access and how it can be detrimental to the patient when they need that care right away.
One of the issues that we have started to identify, we have a health center in the Ironbound section of Newark, and we are noticing that there's ICE activity in close proximity to our health center, and that ICE activity is prohibiting some patients from coming in. We've noticed a decline in our patients, and there was a day a couple of weeks ago where there was ICE activity right outside of the health center, not related to any of our patients, but we had patients that were literally afraid to leave because they felt like they might be apprehended or even stopped and questioned by ICE. So that is another issue that we're dealing with as we try to provide the service. And that's where our virtual health center is coming in because those patients are able to get care without having to leave home. But that's another issue that's really, really serious here in Newark.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. One of the concerns that we often face is this chilling effect created by policy, administration, fear of repercussion, um, and the impact of that on people. I know you're seeing it, Roslyn. Are others seeing, this type of thing, or is there, concern even of people being in this space that there's fear that for repercussion or whether it's termination of resources or other impacts. Are others seeing anything like this?
When it comes to immigrants and
Right,
immigration enforcement, yeah, I mean,
right.
our office hears every day about communities that are feeling under threat from accessing all kinds of healthcare, sending their kids to school, going to the grocery store. There's a real yeah, it's like palpable fear about how people can live their lives when there's just this uptick, and we're expecting more of like violent immigration enforcement. And so our office is keeping an eye on that. If folks have information that they think is important for us to know about, please reach out.
I'll add a little bit that on the DCR front, we've heard from the ACLU of New Jersey as well as LSNJ and other partners that even outside of the well, not outside of the reproductive space, actually, because when we think about issues like housing, for example, that a lot of times the threat of ICE involvement is also causing a chilling effect on people exercising the full range of their rights to file complaints with agencies or file complaints anywhere when they are being mistreated, discriminated against, or experience any type of like hostile environment when one knows that they could be reported to ICE regardless of their immigration status or citizenship status. And we know that that is a real thing around our state and around our country. So we are assessing how we respond to that. Um, and I think it's just worth introducing into the conversation that also, even out of, traditional healthcare spaces, because frankly, I maintain that our homes are our first healthcare space, and the most convenient one, and the one that we go to the most regularly. People are experiencing fear of retaliation, and that's causing, impacts in other places too.
And one thing to note, advocates have been working very hard to get state-based policy passed on this, the Immigrant Trust Act, which would help disentangle New Jersey state government and local government from being involved in immigration enforcement. And so just encourage you all to learn more about that and contact your lawmakers, because it really is an urgent priority for all New Jersey communities to make sure people can access and engage in public life. So encourage you to look into the Immigrant Trust Act.
Yeah, and just speaking to the Immigrant Trust Act, Jeanne, we see a lot of immigrants come in for patient services, and they, not just immigrant patients, but just patients in general. A lot of the times we're speaking to our immigrant patients. A lot of the times they don't realize that we provide real medical services. Like, we have doctors who are performing these procedures, and they often a lot of times ask the question, will the state find out? Will someone know that I'm getting this procedure done? And then that is where the compassion and empathy comes in, and we do reassure them, like, we are an actual medical provider. We have HIPAA laws. We run down the whole spiel of how the process will go, the support, the resources, but we find it very interesting and alarming that abortion providers are not seen as doctors. They're fearful that their information will get out there, and they don't even consider that. Yes, we have HIPAA as well.
Right, and patient privacy laws go so far, but there are data privacy concerns that advocates have been trying to work on as well, with respect to making sure that we can keep patient information private, and even surveillance technologies, right? So So people might know about automated license plate readers, which are how like law enforcement uses things, but um, it's a tool law enforcement uses to like read thousands of license plates a day. And depending on where they're located, they can, implicate abortion clinics or your faith or other kinds of medical services you're seeking. And so we're really concerned about how that might be used, especially when it comes to patients from other states who are seeking abortion care here in New Jersey. And there have been reports about other states that are hostile to abortion using those databases to try to track patient movements. And so all of that to say, there's a lot of intersection around keeping patient records private, keeping other kinds of location data private that we've been trying to work on and work through with other advocates to make sure that we can keep patient information from those who would try to use it for immigration enforcement purposes or other kinds of attacks on abortion providers and patients.
If I could just briefly add, I had not heard or considered maybe, Jasmine, that folks did not see abortion providers as doctors. And I wonder if it's really just yet another, and I'm confident it is yet another tactic by anti-abortionists, because I don't consider them pro-lifers, but anti-abortionists when it comes to like the misinformation that's being spewed out around, at the touch of our phone, but frankly, even I'm sure outside of your building when people are going in to seek some of these services, the people who are out there protesting against these people to access the fullness of their healthcare services, being passed literature or being told that the people inside are not doctors or being, trying to be diverted to the crisis pregnancy centers across the street or down the street, or just in general, like to Jeanne's point about depending on where people are coming from, or at this point, we can get information from so many places. It can be really confusing given the clear rollback an attack on our reproductive health, not just abortion, but just across the board. What types of information and misinformation, most importantly, people are receiving about people who are providing them these services. So it's yet another reason why it's so important for all of our organizations here, I know, have websites and have a lot of resources that we are providing the folks, the participants here, but specifically, I guess if there's like a call to action, knowing that this information is being provided to so many people with a range of, backgrounds, both demographic backgrounds, educational backgrounds, that we divert and encourage people to go to very valid resources when it comes to these topics.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, Aarin, you hit the nail on the head. It is a tactic for misinformation from our anti side, and it it is one of the it is one of our main focuses for destigmatizing and breaking barriers through the coalition, and being boots on the ground to do that work, to dismantle that misinformation. But yes, that is exactly what it is. They still spin this narrative of how things were before Roe v. Wade, and they're doing backdoor abortion care, and they're still trying to uphold that misinformation from 50 plus years ago at this point. And so we're still trying to reverse those narratives.
Yeah, it's a great, you raised a number of key issues, I think, here in terms of the misinformation and the atmosphere where we are today. How much of the focus lends toward outreach? I mean, when thinking about it, you might see that, there may be fewer folks who feel comfortable to reach out to access services, who might be entitled to services or should be aware that the services are provided in your areas. Are there outreach strategies to deal with that, or is that more happen is it more organically through the community the information comes out, or is there a particular strategy towards ensuring people have access to those services?
At Planned Parenthood, we have limited marketing dollars, and we try to, a lot of information about our organization is through word of mouth, but we are utilizing social media and trying to make the best use of the marketing dollars that we have in order to get the information out about access. Our educators are also out in the community and they're able to talk about the services that we provide. And we also have an advocacy arm to the organization. And the advocacy folks are out informing legislators, and they're also out in the community, tabling at events and spreading the word about the services that we're able to provide.
One of the other things that the conversation brings up is when you start talking about data privacy and surveillance and technology, and I hadn't really thought too much about the integration of technology and in this space. Is there an advocacy sort of a next stone to be unturned here? And I see you're smiling, Jeanne.
Yeah, I mean, I think the advocacy is working on it. Community is working on it. As far as stone unturned, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think surveillance technology is something we need to really contend with, and how that might chill people and impact their ability to access care. Or, New Jersey, some part of the healthcare equity package, and some existing laws have protections to protect providers from out-of-state investigations. But some of this stuff is all shared in a national database, and so it's really unclear where how some of the rubber hits the road with what our policies intend to do versus what's actually happening. And so I would just say that we're investigating that and trying to learn from our coalition partners on that, and then also trying to kind of translate that into actionable policy.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to check in and see if we have some questions from the audience. I think we may be in time to do a little bit of that. And I'm just going to go to the first question here. This audience question is, would like to know if there will be any discussion regarding rights to a D&E for women who have miscarried. My understanding is that there are hospitals who ban D&Es. I'm not sure what D&Es are.
I thought maybe that meant DNC, which
Yeah, they're sometimes referred to as D&E, but they're more
maybe DNC.
well known as a DNC, which is ultimately an abortion, whether it is medically induced for, i.e., a miscarriage, or whether it's elective, meaning you chose to have this procedure done. Could you remind me of the question? It was the question if there's going to be some light shed around miscarriages and needing a DNC?
Any discussion regarding rights to a D&E for women who have miscarried? My understanding is that there are hospitals who ban D&Es.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I know about religious hospitals can and do limit the kind of care available to women, reproductive health care. So it might be depending on what provider they're using in the state. And then, we've seen the consequences of abortion bans in other states that have had horrific consequences on patients who miscarry. So just to, I'm not sure if they're talking about New Jersey specifically, but on the New Jersey side, religious hospitals can and do limit the kinds of care available. I'm not sure if it's specifically DNCs or not.
And I'll add, it's always difficult. I'm sure me and Jeanne as lawyers are like trying to figure out exactly how to respond. It's always difficult to respond sometimes to things that may or may not be happening in the state without more details. I will take a very light position to say that, a strong position that the law against discrimination prohibits refusing services to anyone based upon a protected category. And just based off of this little bit that was shared, it could be argued that the protected categories that fall into place here could be gender and or pregnancy, which again, in our state, pregnancy itself is a specific category that's protected in our state. Now, that's not happens at the federal level. And, as Jeanne mentioned earlier, the federal level sets the floor, and our state thankfully goes way above the floor. And often many places will cite to ADAs or other types of laws that just frankly are not as all-encompassing as the laws in our state. And so if there is a belief that people are not being provided appropriate and proper health care, which would include a DNC, based upon a category like just the fact that they can get pregnant, like their gender, then there could be an argument that that is discriminatory. So I do not know, and I do not know whether or not we at DCR have received any complaints like that. I think that if we had, I would have heard of it. And so I don't know what exactly is happening in any specific place. And while certain hospitals that are religious could make an argument that as being private, that they may not need to comply, I think there's a strong argument that may not be true because they are still operating in our state and are thus required to follow the law, which would be the law against discrimination. So I would encourage anyone experiencing those types of or seeing, witnessing, or experiencing those types of limitations or potential discriminatory acts to potentially reach out to the Division of Civil Rights, maybe even the ACLU or others with those concerns.
Yeah, and just to add, Aarin, as far as some hospitals discriminating or not allowing for DNCs to take place for patients who may experiencing a miscarriage, an ectopic pregnancy, any of those things, that is where independent abortion providers and settings come in. That is why it's so important that our work remains available to the community, keeping it community-led, community-based. That's why funders and grants are extremely important in this line of work as abortion independent providers. Most of our facilities, all of the women's centers facilities are ambulatory medical settings. So we do have the resources, we have the anesthesiologists, we do have the proper people in place to make this safe and, more importantly, affordable, whether you have insurance or not. So I just want to shed a little bit of light on that. Even though some hospitals may be following the current administration's federal guidelines, our independent abortion providers come into play for that support and that care.
And you know what, this isn't what you were saying, Jasmine, but I'm glad you brought this up. I will also elevate that in many communities, Indigenous communities, but frankly, well beyond, people also turn to other self-induced abortions. So when I say that abortion is protected, that includes self-induced or also known as medicated abortions are things that people also turn to. So that's not something people should be forced into, but it is also an option that you have a right to in New Jersey.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. The next question we have are you, and this I particularly for Roslyn or Jasmine, are you and your partners finding people from other states traveling to New Jersey for care? Are doctors here protected of treating patients from other more conservative states that target doctors?
Yes, at Planned Parenthood, we are certainly seeing patients coming to us from other states. As I said, our patient navigation program that was put in place a couple of years ago works to assist those patients to get them here, get the care that they need, and then safely get them home again. In terms of the legal protections for the providers, there are laws in the state of New Jersey that have been enacted, and our providers are protected under those laws. As far as I know, we've not had any issues in our health centers regarding this. And as far as I know, it's not been challenged here in the state.
Okay, jumping to the next question. Have you had patients encounter misinformation from generative AI?
I can jump in. I'm not sure where the misinformation comes from. We haven't done any surveys or qualitative, quantitative data or feedback forms asking where they're getting their information. But that is something great to begin doing as we're moving into a world of AI. Um, the misinformation absolutely that we know of comes from our anti um, abortionist. Um, as far as AI, I haven't heard anything. I'm not sure if our legal experts have, though.
Anecdotally, we know that young people tend to get information regarding reproductive health care from social media. And I'm sure that as AI advances, AI is going to become another source of that. Our education department is constantly in the communities, as I said, trying to set the record straight and make sure that folks have the correct information. If they go to our website, they can also find sources, but it's certainly an issue, social media and the reliance that young folks have on the information that they're getting uh, from that media.
A great point. And we will be distributing all of the reference materials that have been discussed, lifted up today. We'll make those available for you. Direct source information is always best. Next, I'm sorry, Jeanne.
I was just going to chime in. Roslyn reminded me. New Jersey has a law that requires public schools to provide comprehensive sex education, and I just want to flag that over the years we've heard repeated problems with some of that, and so I would really encourage you to be active in your communities to know what they're teaching teaching our kids about their sexual health and reproductive health. We've had reports over the years of anti-abortion organizations coming in and teaching them very harmful, providing harmful information to students. And so it's not, there's over 600 school districts in New Jersey. And so curriculum can vary from place to place. But I really do encourage everyone, like that's one way to get involved on these issues is at the local level, keeping an eye on how your schools are implementing comprehensive sex ed.
Thank you. The next question in another group that experiences inequitable access to reproductive health are transgender and non-binary people, including those who can and do become pregnant. What are your centers and organizations doing to provide reproductive health care to these folks?
At Planned Parenthood, we have a gender affirming care program. So patients can come to us, and if they are interested in transitioning, we can assist them in that with hormones. In addition, that they are able to access the gamut of other reproductive health care services that we provide. So we certainly do not discriminate, and they're able to get the same healthcare services that are available to all patients coming into our health centers. And we are doing the gender affirming care at 4 of our 5 health centers now.
And I'll share that on the DCR's front, we have as listed as one of our priorities on our website. We have reproductive justice and gender related issues. And within that, we have a landing page that talks about a range of things that we're working on, some of which I've mentioned today, but including gender affirming care. We've issued guidance related to some of the cases that have come out over the past several months to a year or so, and where we as the regulating body believe and want to ensure that people understand how we would enforce and interpret the law specifically, again, the law against discrimination. And that means protecting gender affirming care and people's right to same. So we have some fact sheets on that. We have trainings publicly available and guidance documents. And those guidance documents are helpful for people who are required to follow that law, how they understand what they're required to do, and fact sheets to inform people on how their protections can are being protected in our state.
And I can jump in a little bit on how the Women's Centers contributes to this topic. We provide trauma-informed, gender-affirming patient care practices. We train our staff to use patients' correct names, their pronouns, their gender identities. We include inclusive policies and language, where we're intentional about the language throughout all of our patients' experiences for LGBTQ plus communities, whether that be on our forms or during intake or in our clinical interactions. We also partner with community organizations through our coalition, like Garden State Equality, to ensure that our services remain accessible, especially for patients who may need additional support. And of course, our continuous and ongoing staff education. We're continuously investing in staff training on gender inclusion, cultural humility, and the specific needs of transgender and non-binary patients. And so ultimately, our goal at the Women's Centers is to just make sure we are a place where all patients feel welcomed, respected, and supported, no matter of their identity, their race, their background, their zip code, their income. We make sure that we're committed to providing care that reflects our truth.
And I'll just add on the policy side that we know that the attacks against trans and non-binary people coming from the federal government and from other states are kind of a similar playbook to how they've gone after healthcare, abortion, and reproductive healthcare. And so I would say the Thrive Coalition has been very responsive to trying to meet the needs of all of the patients that are under attack. And so so one of the lame duck priority bills for the Thrive Coalition is a bill that provides protections for providers, not just of reproductive health care, but also gender affirming care. And so so just to say, I think especially over the last few years, as we've seen, like just the existence of trans and non-binary people under attack, people have tried to be responsive as far as making sure that we're thinking about, the intersectionality of all of it and the how to protect everyone in our communities.
And there's a related question here. Are parents notified when a minor requests gender affirming care?
At Planned Parenthood, we don't provide gender affirming care to anyone under the age of 18. But in terms of parental consent and involvement for our other health services, parental consent is not required.
Okay. We've got another question. What are some of the tactics or tips for communication you suggest patients act on when they share information but they are not believed, leading to harmful outcomes? How do you suggest people obtain advocates immediately to support them when this happens, or if this is suspected to happen, which it does often?
What is the question? What is the it in the question again? Just harm in spaces? I think it may have been mentioned the first part of the question. What is
Yeah,
the it?
what are some of the tactics or tips for communication that you would suggest patients act on when they share information but they are not believed, leading them to harmful outcomes? Just trying to unpack this question. It looks like it might relate to any suggestions for those who are trying to communicate um, with care providers, but they're not believed.
I think my question for the question would be, when they are not believed by who, leading them to harmful outcomes of, like, what is the harmful outcome? Are they seeking to induce their own abortion? Um, I feel like I feel like there's just one key component missing from the question to bring it together to provide the answer. If whomever provided the question could just build on that, I'm pretty sure the panel would be more than happy to help.
Yeah, so if you could provide a little bit more information there to support the question. We have another question in. If an 18-year-old seeks gender-affirming care and uses parents' health insurance, then there is no expectation of privacy because the parent can see the EOB with services and procedures listed. Same issue with teens seeking abortion and if the pregnant person uses parents' health insurance.
I can jump in on that. So at the women's centers, when that is an issue that you may have insurance, but you are fearful that your parent or legal guardian may find out, that is where our funders come into play. Such as NAF, which is the National Abortion Federation Organization, or NJAF, the Bridget Alliance. We lean on those partners and we say, hey, we have this patient here. They are under 18 years old. We give them the brief scenario and we let them know that they are fearful of using their valid insurance that could cover the elective procedure. And we get funding from our partners to cover the entire cost of the procedure for them, so that they don't have to be concerned or fearful of what the outcome could be if a parent finds out. In New Jersey, there are no laws or guidelines for someone under the age of 18 to come in and seek abortion services or help. Unless under that mandatory reporting age guideline. In the state of Pennsylvania, if you are under 18, whether it's that mandatory reporting age guideline or higher, you do have to have parent or legal guardian signature and someone present with you. Again, we are here to help the patient. And so if that does become the case and they're fearful of their home situation and how mom, dad, or legal parent guardian would react, that is when they could go through what's called judicial bypass in the state of Pennsylvania. So there is help, regardless if they can or cannot use the active insurance that would cover.
Okay, that's important. I know we have folks eagerly anticipating the final CLE word. And here comes Rachel.
Here comes Rachel. I also just wanted to kind of maybe elaborate on my read of that one question that we were asking for clarification on. I think it was a broader question about how to best self-advocate when you feel like you're not being heard, and if people should, and also how obtain an advocate to help them with that. And I know there was also a bunch of questions. If you can give some final thoughts on the use of period tracking apps, whether they're safe, whether they're suggestible, what happens if you go to another jurisdiction in a less rights-oriented state. So those are kind of my final two takeaway questions to leave the panel with.
I will add a little bit of something to the question we didn't understand at first. I can't in this moment make any recommendations on how to obtain an advocate. I do think sometimes bringing people along can just validate your feelings because in so many situations, but particularly when we're just experiencing harm or discrimination or confusion, it can be helpful just to have someone else there to bounce ideas off of and help clarify or maybe even just validate a feeling. So that's one just thought of mine. And then one maybe little tool, but is one that is required by law from the DCR perspective. Back in, what is this? This is 2025. I think back in like 2022, well, excuse me, yeah, for as long for many years actually there have been required posters that are supposed to be in all places that fall under DCR's jurisdiction, so that's employment, housing, and places open to the public. These places are supposed to have. I laugh a little bit because I go into places all the time and I do not see these posters, but there are a lot of times I actually do go into places and I see these posters that are displayed, and it's required that they display what the laws and obligations are when it comes to not patients' rights per se, but like literally the laws that are supposed to be enforced when it comes to discrimination. And so in 2022, frankly, in response to the COVID epidemic and the conversations that were happening around health equity and disparities, the team that I was leading at the time updated those posters to make them more digestible and visibly appealing and clearer about what places are supposed to do in response to claims around discrimination and provide clear like ways to call and QR codes and those kinds of things. And so I only say that because not only again are they required by law, but also they were meant to be this way so that people would look at them and know, oh, these are my rights. And here they are very clearly displayed, and have the attorney generals, the chief law enforcement officers, seal on it. Like you can point to something in a room that you were in. You can point to them whenever you're feeling, a little confused about things. So that's one thought about an advocacy tool of sorts.
That's helpful. Rachel brought up that we had a question about menstrual cycle apps in the chat, and I also noticed that we're sort of out of time, but I would like to give each of you a few moments for key takeaways or any final thoughts you may want to have or share. So either with the question with regards to the apps, or if you have some things you'd like to sort of make a final point, please do.
I'll chime in to just say I don't know enough about the apps, and I like if it were me, I'd be Googling right now about it. But I do know that the digital privacy is a real concern, just period. And just to chime on to that, Aarin mentioned DCR is a tremendous resource for complaints about discrimination, but I hope you'll also think about the ACLU of New Jersey as a resource. We want to hear from you when it comes to digital privacy, when it comes to abortion access, when it comes to reproductive health generally, or immigrants' rights. Any of the things you think about us for, if you have information about your clients or about how things are impacting New Jerseyans, we want to be your partners on that. So please feel free to reach out.
I will add a little bit of some discussions we have been having over the last maybe 6 to 8 months at the women's centers. As far as apps, some are safer than others. But what we do know is many period tracking apps collect and ultimately share data that could be used to surveil, criminalize, or track reproductive choices. I also know that safer options with apps would be to choose ones with stronger privacy protections, ones that may not collect personal data or store all of the information locally in your device. Maybe if there's an anonymous mode in the app that you choose, maybe look for that one. It's still very new, but we do know that these apps do track and do share data. So just do a little bit of research before choosing which one that you would like to support your menstrual journey.
I don't have any comments regarding the Period app, but I just want to remind our participants to visit our website, www.ppmnj.org, for a list of the services that we provide, access to appointments, and other information regarding Planned Parenthood and the services offered. And thank you for being here today.
And I'll close this out by also thanking LSNJ for having a DCR and me again. And very briefly, I stopped using my period apps, quite honestly, and I went old school and just started putting it in my calendar. But I can't contribute more to that. But at larger scale, I hope that one thing that participants take away from today, like I said earlier, is that advocates, that providers, and even state agencies are working in tandem through litigation, enforcement, legislation, public education, direct services, to really make sure that our state remains a place where reproductive rights are real, where they're protected, they're accessible, even against this federal regime.